pineapple, pineapple, I'm a pineapple, pineapple, I'm a pineapple, I'm sweet, I got a beat, just look at me, what do you see? Pineapple, I'm a pineapple, pineapple, I'm a pineapple, pineapple, I'm a pineapple, pineapple, I'm a pineapple.
I collect books, and people are like, why do you have all these books? And I've got 10 boxes of comic books that are. I would love to get rid of some of them, but this is what I collected in the days. It's like as we go more and more digital, it's nice to have a physical copy of something, because if we ever lose that digital aspect,
you need the physical prints, books, magazines, just to be able to refute or be like what the actual F and confirm the different supposed Mandela effects, right? Or just government editing, censorship, right? It's like, well, it's a fact that it's published, printed in this year's copy of this book, and boom, here it is. Can't go in and stealth edit it, right? Like
that's why I collect money. I mean, I've got a huge money collection from all over the world, places that
I
I've
see a Canada 5 right there.
Yeah, so this is the thing when we start going to digital currency, all this stuff disappears, and so this is one of my favorite bills. The stuff from Bhutan are just so beautiful. I have more in the back, but I mean, this is a lot of this I've collected from around the world.
Close up, come on! Beauty.
It's hard to show them. I can't see where my camera is. So I got Iraqi dinars from before Saddam Hussein put his face on them. This is a lot of stuff from Bhutan that I've collected. The ones are now super small, but they used to be the size of the 5 and the 20 here. But yeah, I've really enjoyed collecting a lot of this currency from around the world, because I have stuff from countries that don't even exist anymore.
Right, both countries that don't exist as well as countries that do, but currencies that don't.
Yeah, the currencies keep changing, and so I have a whole Nepali collection. Like, these are all very old Nepali bills. None of these exist anymore. This is like 3 kings ago. And so as you get closer to the future, everything, keeps changing in the Nepali bills. And so, yeah. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. I dug this out the other night. One of the security guys that works at Club Luna downtown that I've done a lot of graphics for, he's from Zimbabwe, and he's like, do you have any Zimbabwe bills? And so I found one in my collection. All right. What does this say?
Upside down, but you got 3 megalithic stones. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. $200 million, and this is worth about.
I see that.
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah,
you got the height of the hyperinflation of the Zimbabwe millionaire.
$200 million, and it's interesting that they use dollars in Zimbabwe. It's like going to Vietnam, and the dong. It's like $1 is like 10,000 dong. So if you go into the bank to retrieve money and you have $100 bill, you got to bring a suitcase, man, because they're giving you all these bills. It's like, what am I doing with all this?
The actual cases where the paper money is equal to toilet paper, because you have so much of this thin paper and it's worthless other than being able to wipe your butt with.
One of my favorites, and I was going to show this is what I was going to bring up, is from Tibet. And so this obviously doesn't exist anymore, but this is a Tibetan note of trade. It's
oh, wow. Can you actually put that a little closer to the cam? This is epic. So Tibetan, like, banknote /
Sorry. Yeah, so this is like a banknote or a trade note, right?
Trade note.
And so it's beautiful. And a friend of mine reproduced this so that we could blow it up large. And yeah. These, I mean, it's
amazing.
Imagine carrying that around,
Right, like a book of bills.
But even
a briefcase.
Even old Nepali bills are like super, like they still have the rhino on the 100, but the 100 now is a fourth of the size of this. And so this is a massive bill from 1920s, I think. But yeah, I've collected money everywhere I go. I try and find places that have currency. The most amazing spot I found was in Lima, Peru. Brian took me to the spot where you could buy silver ingots from the Spanish times, and they had books and books and books of bills. And I was just sitting there going, God, I wish I had the money to buy some of this stuff, because I've never seen a collection like that. You go into Nepal, you go into like the carpet shops, and they'll have bills from, you know, different countries because people come there and trade their currency. But my goodness, this shop in Peru blew my mind. I'd never seen that much currency, and from old to new. So yeah.
Really, in Peru?
Yeah, of all places. Thank you, Brian Forrester. Shout out to my friend Brian for showing me that. And then I just found this $10 bill, which is like also super old.
Oops,
So,
hold on.
in my collection, yeah. This is an old 10. They don't look like this no more. Yeah, so got to keep that one around.
Definitely, and
but this is
epic,
the, you know,
real
this
history.
is the time of you know, a lot of forgeries and a lot of fakes, and a lot of things, like I said, are going digital. And you know, it's not like clinging to the past, but I think we all need to, you know, start collecting things that we like that are in print, because there may be a time in our life, if we have another Carrington event. Our son is burping some really crazy stuff right now, and we've had some amazing aurora borealis here in Oregon. Normally we would never see it, but this is a definite, you know, weakening of our magnetic field, so that all of a sudden we get these particles this far south. And so the question is, you know, how is our grid going to hold up against a burp or a directed X-class flare? Or, you know, we've had a few of these that have been
right, and some crazy ones, and I think we're right in the midst of one right now as well. And that it just takes one time for it to snap Earth's magnetic field, for it to completely collapse, and us just boom, inundated and potentially like all dead, wiped out, like complete reset.
We would survive in patches, but you know, we'd be thrown back 1,000 years. I mean, we would have to rebuild like all of our technology. And so, speaking of books worth buying, there are books. We have Powell's Books here in Portland, which is really one of the most amazing bookstores in the world, because they have everything. I mean, old, new, the whole 9 yards. But if you can pick up a book on how to make things, it's like, that is probably one of the most
what everyone needs
important books ever, because it starts from scratch and it shows you how to make stuff from scratch all the way to the finished product. The other one, it's hard to find, but there's a PDF out there that's all it's in field medical practices for the military. And so if you need to, you know, bandage yourself, you're out in the woods, or you don't know what you've done and you don't have insurance and you can't go to the hospital, this is one of the most amazing field guides ever. It's about 300 pages, and it shows you how to basically fix any wound that would happen to you out in the field with, you know, next to nothing or supplies that you have. And so I recommend people definitely try and find a copy of this and things to make, because these books are key. I'm not sure of the name of the things to make, but it's like it's how things are made, and it's an incredible book. But we need to do this. We need to, you know, we need to have physical copies of things, kind of like cookbooks.
And analog backup books of how to
phone.
continue society onwards and rebuild, right?
Exactly,
From farming to electrician, like just so much. And that there are a lot of good ones that I've seen a lot through the prepper communities being published lately. And yeah, great points, Hans, 100%.
I mean, how long would any of us survive in the woods with nothing? I mean, I'm savvy. I'm a hiker. You know, I'm an outdoorsman. But could I figure out how to survive in the woods? Well, thank goodness for some YouTube videos of these people building houses in the woods from nothing. I've enjoyed watching a lot of those.
Right, like, why does my mud hut not look anything like the one on the YouTube video I remember?
But coming back to your point about posting YouTube videos, I mean, a lot of people don't realize how much time and effort goes into doing a lot of the videos that we watch online. I mean, it may be a 18-minute clip on CinemaSins or something like this, you know, don't demonetize us here or whatever for utilizing names. but it takes that guy 5 to 8 hours to put together that 30 minutes. And it reminds me of rendering 3D animations back in design school. Man, you'd come up with a 30-second clip, and that would be an overnight project, just rendering it.
Just rendering, right? Like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
30 seconds. That's like an 18-hour render. Well, thank goodness, technology and speed has caught up, and we now have, Cray supercomputers in our iPhones and our Androids, but back
cloud computing where it renders in like the cloud on some other server, who knows where
one server, it's multiple servers. And Jay Widener made a very interesting comment on a podcast that he was on in September. This phone takes 7,000 to 10,000 people to make. We don't realize it because it comes as a finished
society
piece.
Collapses.
All
you
of the
print one of those out.
That goes into it, the mining, everything that goes into this just adds to that pile of sand. And it's just like, without that group of people from around the world, we would not have this technology. We would not be sitting here having this conversation right now.
Right, and it can't be localized like supply build chains. It's literally a global like mining, manufacturing, development, right? And that if there is a collapse of the overall system and like a reset of some sort of like catastrophe event, and sure, maybe like 1,000 years later, a couple people might still have one that like they pull out that was like saved or worked or something, but it would be straight magic to them. And like that when it broke or if it breaks, it's just they have zero understanding, nothing of what it is, just magic and no hope in hell that those community of people still there would have any chance of making another or like.
And we become a cargo cult. Worshipping the effigy of the cell phone.
Like talking to God from the ether and projected, right? Like, who knows?
Well, okay, so look at Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, right? They were trying to communicate, the children in that movie were trying to communicate the story of the pilot that crashed, and they were the remnants of the crash from the plane, but they rebuilt the effigy of the plane, and they reconstructed the entire story of it. They were a cargo cult in a sense. Interesting. And we kind of are today with, even though we have amazing technology, we're still preserving a lot of these ancient sites. And it's interesting that we're preserving these ancient sites. We don't know how to reconstruct them. I mean, there's stuff in Egypt and Peru that we can't do with our fancy technology today. We can't. And so the question is, how are they doing it? And so by preserving it and making it a museum piece or a heritage site, in a sense, that is our essence of being a cargo cult. We're reminiscing and in a sense praying to a time that once existed that none of us know because it's been passed down through lore, legend, oral stories, and forgotten histories, and then rewritten histories, as I talk about a lot in my, all right, here we go, shameless plug, in my Lost Mysteries of Kemet book. A lot of this deals with our understanding through, passed down cultures and passed down or oral traditions of the land that existed before the Greeks, because everything we talk about Egypt today comes from the Greeks, the Romans, and then the Arabs who took over in the most recent past. And so that's our history of ancient Egypt. And, the Greeks came in, they were the conquerors. So, they divided the history and rewrote the history as their own, in a sense, or a mimic of their own. This is what is passed down through Egyptology. And so there's so many misconceptions that they've just glazed over. But if you actually look at the hieroglyphs and you understand what's going on in these concepts, because hieroglyphs aren't like letters, they're stories, they're pictographs,
they're symbols. They have 1,000 words in each pictograph.
And when you put them together, you create an infographic, And so I've had a hard time contemplating in my research Champollion, translating the Rosetta Stone. Well, there's no way that he could have translated the Rosetta Stone except from diaretic to Greek, because those are the only two pieces of the stone that are intact. But the top section that's hieroglyphs is cracked in half and could be much taller. And so there's no way that we know technically what all these hieroglyphs meant and what their syntax was. There's no way. There's no way Champollion ever could have translated the hieroglyphs. He can translate diaretic because it reflects what's in the Greek, but not the hieroglyphs. And so a lot of that knowledge was passed down from ancient past. And so, true scholars outside of Egyptology, because in Egyptology, you're in your horse blinders in the realm of quackademia, and you're only allowed, like anything, you're only allowed to be told so much or to present so much. But there's a lot of other research out there, especially once you go into the field and you start looking at some of these sites and you're going, there's something else going on here. We're not being told a lot of the history, especially when you're in Peru and you see the different layers of construction from Ananpacha to Hananpacha to Inca. And they go, oh, Inca's on the top, so everything else must be Inca. And it's like, no.
Right? And it's like, why is the stuff on the bottom exponentially better, perfect, bigger, impossible? We can't do it today. And then the top bit, like most recent layer, the Incans, is just like crumbled, like chunks of broken rocks
with clay mortar. And so, I mean, they didn't have the technology to recreate the two different styles. One is built out of the bedrock of the earth, and the other one, like in Egypt, is cut stone, and they're cut very precise, and they fit together. What you couldn't fit a human hair between them. Everybody says this, but having actually been to Peru, you take a credit card or a piece of paper, and it's not going between these cracks. But when you're in Cusco, which has had a lot of earthquakes there, you see how it's shifted, and you see how they build these things, and it's interesting because it's like a frontal facade, and then it's scooped, and the piece beneath it is scooped, so it all interlocks through these scooping mechanisms, and then the back of it is fill. But they don't really find a way to reproduce this during Inca time. They just use smaller size rubble rock, and they build everything from that. And I'm not discrediting them. Their buildings are amazing. You go to a place like Tipan, which is a waterwork, or Moray. I might be confusing these two. Yeah, Moray is like a irrigation segment for where they were doing a lot of farming. And so the Inca trade back in the time was they would grow corn at different elevations, which is why they have about 20 different varieties of corn, a few different varieties of quinoa, or quinoa, for those of us that can't pronounce anything. And they also have, like 10 or 15 different types of potato. And so when they would trade to different cultures, yeah, exactly. So this is actually at Ollantaytambo. Yeah, this is like one of my favorite spots in all of Peru. But when they're trading with different cultures, they would ask them, where do you live and what is your elevation? And so therefore they could find the right corn or the right potato or the right quinoa to trade with them so that they actually could grow it in their own culture.
Right. And like they had the different the agricultural terraces from like top to bottoms of their valleys of their mountains and everything, so that they could literally have 3 to 4 multiple of these different varieties and environments, corns, and
somehow they would find water sources at the top of the mountain and then irrigate it all the way down through all these fields. And so the water came from the top source and ended up down in the valley. And so they were like reverting streams into these collecting pools, and then they would open the collecting pool and it would spill out into
floods each level of water, each one. And
they do this in the fall as well. Like, it's interesting. You go to the rice paddies in the upper villages, like high altitude villages, and they're taking the stream water and irrigating it off into a pit, and then they flood their fields from that pit once it fills up. And that's
not just the fields, the terraces. They have those exact same terraces, but it's that they still use them, and that they're probably tens of thousands of years, and that all of these terraces everywhere throughout are remnants and leftovers from that original pre-cataclysm builder civilization, and just some indigenous cultures have kept using them, repairing them, and like making them their own to the modern day. And then lots of spots, like whether it's South Africa, whether it's Yemen, whether it's some I've found in Alberta, Canada, or down in Peru, South America, that they're not used at all, or they're just starting to again, or there's history that the last culture pre colonialism, capture, and genocide were using them and taught, passed on from the original survivor civilization sort of thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw a lot more of the ancient stuff in Peru because obviously these are now heritage sites. But in Nepal, as the villages grow, they keep tearing into the sacred forest. The sacred forest is the Gabian system that naturally holds the land together. They start building new terraces, and by the first monsoon, all that's washed down into the river valley below. And so my father would go into these villages and become the people person. So he, as an anthropologist and sociologist, would talk to the villagers and basically would say, hey, okay, how are you using landshed management? How are you using forestry management? How are you using slash and burn agriculture? How are you using watershed management? And as the village grows, all these different components change. But the biggest one is landshed and forestry management, because if they're tearing out the sacred old growth forests to build all these new terraces, they're removing the natural system that's holding all that land mass together. And so my dad then would hire or bring in the development team from the forestry department or from the watershed, management department. And basically they know how, water can flow and how they can divert things. And the foresters know what trees grow great in what environments, but they don't know how the people use the forest, and they don't know how the people use the water. And so my dad would be that middle lining between the two. Because in the village, the forest is used very differently than we would consider. When you have a daughter, you plant 2 trees for her. And so one tree becomes her best friend that she can tell her secrets to and have, a spiritual moment with. And the other tree can be sold as the dowry to her husband for, a successful marriage. But the foresters don't know this. They just know what grows great where. And it's interesting, all over Nepal, you have these chortans, these areas where when you're trekking, it's a place to rest. The porters will sit there and drop their packs. And it's these 2 trees, and they call it the people tree. But it's 2 trees that grow together. And so it's like, in a sense, a male and a female aspect or a friendship aspect of these trees. And they have these areas that you go to on all the trekking trails that you can sit under. And they're definitely these different trees.
Pretty epic and awesome, and
I miss Paul.
I can imagine.
One of my best friends passed away in September. I've known him since 6th grade.
Wow.
I lived with him in Nepal my senior year. Won't get too deep into the details, but it was really sad because it reopened my connection with Nepal. And his father passed away while I was in Las Vegas in October. So the family wants to go back to Nepal and take their ashes, and I kind of want to go with them.
We need to get you there. I want to come with you too. We need to go to Nepal. We need to get Hans back to Nepal, and Bernie needs to get there too in 2025.
Go fund me in the link. No, just kidding.
No, we gotta not. We have to not be kidding about it and actually do it, right?
Like that, but it's like the reality of traveling the world these days, especially to Asia. It's not super cheap. It's not expensive. It's expansive, right? So the idea is to expand the horizons. I would love to lead a group there and take them around to different sites of Kathmandu.
We got to do that.
Chitwan, and then up into parts of the Annapurna circuit like Tatupani, and maybe even up to Muktinath, because Muktinath it's near Taurang Pass. It's very high in altitude. There's 108 spigots. And you have groups of Hindus that come from like the lower plains of India. They do their pilgrimage like the Muslims do to Mecca. They'll do their pilgrimage all the way up to the spot at Muktinath, and they will strip down to their sacred rope, basically, and a little bit of a loincloth, and they will walk through all 108 spigots of freezing water. And there's a massive Shiva temple there. This whole valley used to be a seabed, and so you find all these soligrams. I haven't unpacked any of these, sadly. A soligram is like a fossil, basically, and they're these black rocks that are clay rocks that have been hardened.
I've seen that, right? You can like smash them open, cut them open, and there's fossils.
No, the best thing to do is you put them in a pot of boiling water.
Oh, crack open.
And they crack open, yeah. Or you put them in the fire and then you drop them into water and they'll crack open. And, you know, I have one of those, what they call, oh, this is an ancient screw. No, it's a 400 million year old from the bottom of the sea. But they found these massive, like, almost like clamshells in this region, similar to what you find in Alaska. And I'd imagine also in Alberta when they were doing a lot of the shale stuff. But in Alaska, they found these massive shells that are all petrified now. When they cut into them, because they're all crystallized, it creates this rainbow crystal. And they sell this stuff for pretty much money. But in Nepal, especially in Muktinat,
yeah, ammonite,
they have one of these, basically soligrams or ammonite or whatnot, in the Shiva temple. And if you're not a devout Hindu, you can't go in there. And it's kind of the same in the Shiva temple in Kathmandu. You can get in there, you know, a little bit of a vig goes a long ways. But technically, they don't want you to go into these temples because you're not a Hindu and you don't understand, you know, the religious aspect of it. But it's really interesting to see one of these massive soligrams or fossils in this temple at Muktinat at, you know, 13,000 feet in the Himalayas. So, yeah. Good times. So I really want to go back, and I've thought about, you know, doing tours there, possibly tours in India. When I worked with Patricia Iwan in Egypt, she has a really good connection in India that does tours of a lot of the ancient sites that I haven't even seen, because when I was in India, you know, I was a teenager. I've been to a lot of cities and a lot of old sites in India, but I haven't seen like the Ajanta caves or the Barbara caves or any of that. And it's like, God, I would love to go there and see some of this stuff. I've been to Jaipur.
On my bucket list. And
I've been to the Taj Mahal when they used to let you down into the sub catacombs, but they don't anymore because the river is kind of overflowing into that area. And there used to be a lot of kids that would pickpocket you because you go down, like you go into the Taj. The Taj is a like beautiful structure, but Agra, where it is all coal burning fuel. So all you smell all day long is sulfur. It's like, oh God, it's horrid. But you go to the Taj, and they built it so the 4 towers, if there's ever an earthquake, would fall away from the structure, which is amazing. In the upper
engineering of ancient buildings is just much more than it is now. It's wild.
Well, we have buildings that are earthquake resistant, but you know, back then they didn't have that kind of tectonic technology, so they used, you know, the internoggin to basically figure out.
We made them earthquake proof. A lot of it with the polygonal.
Yeah. Praveen Mohan, or this guy, I'm sure you've seen his channel. He does a lot of stuff out of India. He was talking a couple of years ago because they closed the subterranean area of the Taj Mahal. And he's like, if anybody's been, I've tried to reach out to him a couple times because I've been down there. And so in the upper catacombs, they have the 2 tombs of the king and his wife, because he built it for her. And then they buried him there. He was going to build another one across the river, the Black Taj, but it never got built. And these are all marble that's multiple layers, and they have gemstones interlaid within the multiple layers. And so when you shine a torch or a flashlight up to the layer, you know, you get like a foot wide glow pattern around it that shows all these gemstones that are within the different layers, which is really impressive. But when you go down into the subterranean catacombs, you take off your shoes, you go down the stairs, and it's all lit by kerosene torch. So you're inhaling like the kerosene smoke that's coming out of there. And always at the bottom of the stairs is a little kid that pickpockets you. And you're like, if you don't feel it, you don't feel it. But I felt it, and I grabbed his hand. I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Trying to grab my wallet. But in the subterranean catacombs are the real tombs. So the ones up above were facade. But the ones down in the catacombs are the real tombs. And like what you see in some places in Egypt, when you shine your torch up to the alabaster in Egypt, it will glow Like it will literally light up the entire alabaster.
Really?
But when you're
That
in the catacombs in the subterranean area of the Taj Mahal, it lights up pretty much half of the tomb with all the inlaid real gemstones and marble that's down there. And it's really sad that they've quit access down there. There's another room off of that room that's never been open to the public forever, and this is the room that's starting to flood because I can't remember the name of the river that goes through there. Its even flow has moved out so much of the shoreline that now the water line is right up against the base of the Taj. And so, like this and Machu Picchu and other great sites of the world, they want to start doing only virtual tours, which is sad. And Machu Picchu is really sad, but I understand. I mean, God, you got 100,000 tourists that go through there a year. I don't know if that's the correct number, but I'm sure it's pretty close. And it's just degrading, like in Nepal, a lot of those terraced areas because there isn't really a natural gabion system other than what the Inca built and some of the pre-Inca built with the stonework. And so it rains there so much that a lot of it is washing out, and they don't want the tourists going through there, which is super sad. Yeah, that's Ollantaytambo as well, the giant stairs. Yeah, Ollantaytambo is my favorite spot in Peru of all of them, because if you go around the corner to where your mouse is from this site, there's a bunch of quarried areas, and they have some of the most interesting cut marks in the quarries. You obviously have to jump over the fence, not get caught by the guard. I did this. Nobody else on my tour wanted to do this. I hopped over the wire and I ran up the cliff face because it's all stairs. And there's a section up there that it looks like a queen-sized bed that was taken out of the bedrock. And it's just laying there. It was left in situ or left after it was cut out.
I think I've seen a picture of what you're talking about. Like,
the question is, okay, how do you cut out the sides, the top?
Right? How do you get the 90-degree behind? Right? I know
And
exactly.
I measured it, and it's like a half a centimeter, or less than a quarter of an inch of material that was removed between how wide that actual space is and how wide the queen-size bed piece of rock that's sitting there is. And so, they used wires and sand and water. And I'm like,
no. Let's see someone do that today. Impossible. Ridiculous.
How are you cutting out the backside? Please tell me that.
Right? Like, it's so the impossible.
But Ollantaytambo is one of the most amazing spots because at the top of the stair area, if you go to the right, it wanders around this old Inca trail, and then you can see the face of Viracocha. But up to the left,
big, massive face on the side of the mountain. That's carved out.
Yeah. Up to the left is the Sun Temple, and it's this. I want to say it's sandstone. I'm not entirely sure, but the pieces weigh in excess of 80 tons. Okay, well, 100 tons is what?
Right, like
200,000 pounds. So think about that. The quarry for where those came from is across the Urubambu River, which is down 1,000 feet from the site. It's a raging river, and it's another 2,000 feet up the next mountain. And you've got these are the smaller pieces, but when you get up to the top of the Sun Temple, it's just amazing. And so it's weird that you would see this and go, okay, all of these pieces came from this quarry across the valley. How did they move them? And then you have all the weird knobs on everything, and they're like, oh, that's what they wrap their ropes around. But then you've got to ask yourself, well, why on the walls of some of these places are there knobs as well? So the knobs are built into the
and why are there the same knobs in Egypt, the same knobs on Easter Island, the same knobs like Indonesia, literally everywhere?
So this is, remnants of a lost understanding on how to work these materials and how to work, basically the stonemasons from way back. Hey, mushrooms, what do you know? God, you're just blasting through these, but there's some.
Sorry, trying to find specific one. My apologies, but this one here showing what you're mentioning earlier of how
That Machu Picchu, yeah. So on the bottom you have I believe it's called Urin Pachu, these stairs that are on the right. So this is inside of a little alcove. This is carved into the actual bedrock. That's the lowest of the oldest phase of architectural or stonemasonry going on in Peru. Then on top of that, you have these cyclopean blocks that are all uniform, like what you see there.
But polygonal, where they're uniform but slightly different, so they're literally earthquake proof.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you have the Inca construction.
Right? Like no actual masonry done on them whatsoever. They're chipped, they're broken. They just literally picked off the whatever rocks are on the ground and started stacking them back on top of.
You see this all over Peru, and it's amazing that the archaeologists will come there and they look at the top level and they go, oh well, whatever we carbon date the materials on the top level to must be what made the rest of the site. And so even the stuff on the bottom has been repurposed by the Inca.
Just restacked original.
Yeah. But that is some of the most amazing work at the top. And you see this all over the sites of Cusco. You have the Inca Roca wall, which is more like what you were showing from Ollantaytambo. But then you also have the wall at the Cusco Museum, which is this. It's amazing. Everything is very uniform and brick-like, but it's super ancient. So yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're all good.
Random ones in there. Got to put together a full presentation for what you're describing and talking about.
I should, and it's funny because I did a video for a friend of mine, so I could show a slideshow of all my pictures from, well, not all of them, but a select pictures from Peru, and I had a nice Peruvian track. I should dig that up at some point. It's been a while since I've put that together, but it would be nice to show people some of the things that you see in Peru, because as I was talking church, I mean, you're just driving down the road, and right next to the road is this amazing site that nobody's ever heard of. It's like, what is this?
There's so many of them there, and that's the best part. Is it's like the narrative of academia, everything's been found, there's nothing new to discover, and it's like, no, just travel to different places, and literally everywhere you go, just start digging or taking the foliage, the plants off, finding stuff, and what's buried beneath. There's so much, and
there's also a lot of restrictions, so you can't go a lot of places. And so I mean, if we actually look at our planet, there's so much of our planet that has never been traversed by foot. It's been air surveyed, but especially up in Canada, like when I fly to Amsterdam, flying over most parts of Canada, there's not even roads. Same with parts of Alaska.
It's literally still inhabited by Sasquatch and like potentially mammoths. Who knows what could still exist up there? Furry rhino, for all we know.
We supposedly we occupy less than 7% of the land mass of the Earth, which is less than 1/3 of the Earth, because the rest of what we see is water. And so we all live in cities and we take everything for granted, but there's, flyover country that's never been traversed by foot. And you see this, but then there's also places that have in these ancient, areas and ancient sites. And all these are under government restrictions. So you can't get access to go up and over the hill at Moray or at Tipon.
Or
to go actually
even see in the Grand Canyon, where there's all the pyramid temples and the story history of Kincaid finding the under mountain cities. And you try to fly a drone there, it gets shot down. You try to actually hike there, you get chased out by a physical Apache attack helicopter. That happened to Rex over at Leak Project a few years ago. It's crazy. He's got the videos up, and it's like, what is a Apache military attack helicopter doing patrolling this supposed national park wilderness? Like, what?
Yeah.
Why is it blocked? We know why.
Meanwhile, on Sesame Street.
Right? And so I wanted to bring up the reference picture of what I was talking about earlier here in regards to us being so close to the
Yeah.
winter solstice just happening, so that the sun would have just set here at the winter solstice. Now it's going through here, and that essentially got 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 1 month.
Oh,
Sorry,
all,
1
all
month,
the
2 month
actual different
days as it goes through, as it
oh,
progresses, and it's literally ancient solar calendars that it starts and ends with the winter summer solstices. You got the equinox here, and then you have 1 2 3 months, 1 2 3 months, 1 2 3 months, 1 2 3 months, 4 sets of 3
and you
months,
have
12, the
brain
full.
star symbology above that in the circular stained glass, and above that even. And so, what is that all about? Are
Right,
those
like
cycles? Wow, there's some interesting antiquitech going on in that building for sure.
that's next level, and like those are like waveguide generating like antenna that's it's wild, like the fractal ray waveguide antenna technology going on here. And does it, the theory, the most likely science and energy, is you've got acoustic and plasma, and then something to do with the planetaries and the sun and the moon energy is probably also going into it or something, right? Like it's so advanced, but so not understood by our current technology understanding and practices, right? Like completely different science and
So
knowledge base.
I haven't looked into how they redid Notre Dame. Obviously, they can't reconstruct it anything like it originally was, and they lost a lot of the vibrational, technology that was that building. But it's interesting that we can't recreate these things today. We can't. You go to Barcelona and you look at the Gaudi structure that he built, or is still being built, and it's taken over 200 years to build this
Right?
thing.
Yeah, I had a picture of that up that I flipped through there earlier, and the one you're talking about, right? Like it's just
Beautiful building. It's built to mimic oceanic creatures, which I thought was really interesting.
I did not know that aspect of
Go
it.
couple. Wait, like 10 back. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, there was it's like right that. What is? Whoa, go forward.
Oh,
What is
these
that?
ones.
Yeah,
So
it's an original
there's
way. That's like how they would move lumber or something like this here in the Pacific Northwest. But what is that?
yeah, they had these all over in throughout Europe, throughout Central America, and like North America too, I believe, and like in the castles and estates of France, England, and whatnot, and that there are these first supposed elevators and trolley cars, and they appear as soon as pictures appear. And it's like, were they there before? This looks like pretty ancient. And then a lot of them also, they're very similar built things that were a couple hundred years prior that they claim were using for water and for moving water up and
I was about to
down.
say the aqueducts are also fascinating because you see a lot of this in Peru as well. There's what they call the Inca Gate, and it's a huge ancient water aquifer, or not water aquifer, but like a trough that they could move water across the valley. Whoa!
Yeah,
Wow.
I know exactly what you're talking about. There's many of them, and how they were
I'm
able to keep
how an
the
elevator system
gradient.
is powered. Is it water powered? How are the mechanisms working? That is always a fascination. Oh, go back like 2. Yeah, that one. So these are in India, and what's interesting is a lot of these pieces move
right? They and independent of each other.
independent of each other, correct? Which is similar to like prayer wheels in Nepal, but these are made out of stone.
Right? Stone, and then usually have like
The
gold and
Praveen,
metal coils around them and stuff.
give a
And yeah,
shout out to Ian Mohan's channel. He does some brilliant work, like researching a lot of the ancient structures of India. I would love to meet this guy because his
you
knowledge
and me both.
is
100%.
there it is, the Sun Temple. And so all these pieces were set up with these interstructural pieces that would flex when there's earthquakes. But each one of these, I think the one in the middle is the heaviest of them all. Not that one, the one next to it. Yeah, that one there. It's like 80 tons. And so all these came from a quarry across the river and up another mountain. And so how are they moving these 80-ton blocks down from a mountaintop without them
Even
rolling
extracting them from the mountaintops. Such
down the hill?
precision.
They would roll down the hill. If they're using logs, of course, there are no logs at this altitude in Peru at all. You go to Peru now,
And then
you're
how do they get them up the opposing mountainside,
well,
right? Like,
not only that, but how do they get them across the Urubambu River? That's the other weird fascination. And there's 2 stones that sit on the quarry trail. They call the resting stones, and they just left them there. And there's nothing underneath them, so it's like they had to have been lifting these things somehow. That's 80 tons. Come on, man. Come on, man. That would take close to 2,000 people to move with ropes and potentially pulleys. So where are you fitting 2,000 people on these trails? How are you moving this stuff? Peru is the most mind-boggling place I've ever been to, because there's no evidence of ancient technology.
2,000 people don't fit on those trails, yet alone the leverage to be able to be lifting and like bringing the force out. Like, it's just such insanity with the methods they claim that they were used. And it's like, if you actually like put that into a computer simulation today and try to run what they claim, I guarantee you none of them would work out. Like, we need to start doing that. We need to start debunking the official claims through running computer simulations and be like, look, it's impossible. What you're saying is just, it's not fact, it's false. You're straight up lying.
Well, the other thing is we're constantly told that there's no evidence of ancient technology. You're looking at it right here. How are they cutting these things? How are they moving them? That's technology that we have lost somewhere in the past. And the ultimate question is, how long ago? Yeah, so all these pieces are amazing.
Right, like clearly advanced machining needed to be able to make these and cut them and construct them. Like, your evidence hidden in plain sight all over the world.
Today we'd use a CNC machine. Well, what were they using in the past? Oh, this is all done with chisels and saws. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. Go back one. So there you have what they claim to be the Dropa stones that were found in the Bompo Museum on the left, that were taken by Ernst Wagner. I called him Fritz or something on a different show. Unfortunately, I didn't remember his name. But yeah, Ernst Wagner took these photos in the 80s after some of this stuff started coming out. After Mao's Cultural Revolution, Mao died in 1976. And so in the early 80s, some of these pieces started coming out in the museums, and many of them, are ancient Chinese buy discs. And I always keep showing this piece. So this is an ancient jade buy disc that was gifted to me, and the writing on it is a pre-Chinese hieroglyphic style that isn't obviously used today. And so getting this thing
like proto language of it, like that alone authenticates.
Somebody wants to take a photo of it and figure out what it actually says. Great. But it's hard to decipher a lot of these things. And the majority of these stones that were found in China, and there were hundreds of them found in grave sites, have nothing on them. They're made from jadeite or granite. Jadeite is a granite, and so usually jadeite is a granite material that has both jade crystal infused within it, and oftentimes mercury and cobalt. All these stones hold a charge, which is really interesting.
Dielectrics and
You do
conductors.
quantum oscillation harmonic testing. You'll attach electrodes to them, and then you'll pulse. You'll either see if it already has a pulse, or you'll pulse electronic or electrical information through it, and it will repeat the pulse. And so this is how our solid state hard drives work today. I mean, there's no moving parts in a solid state hard drive. And so you're pulsing electrical information into this hard drive, and it's storing it. And so we've mastered, this ancient technology today with our computer sciences. But, the ancients already were, in a sense, doing this.
Probably more mastered and advanced and developed in it, and we're just beginning to recognize the technology now. And who knows, like some of these authentic original like discs and ancient artifacts in the future, very soon we might be able to onboard them with our new technology to computers and AI and actually read them and scan them and activate them and get the potential energy or digital storage or information that could have been encoded on them as computers of the past cycles advanced technology hard drives and access them soon to be in the future. Maybe
AI definitely has some interesting uses, but as I was discussing our cell phone technology, right, and how many people go into making that, AI is not able to do that. Without the internet, AI would never exist. But what's come out of AI is really fascinating. We can't call it AI. We got to call it machine learning, because you're basically.
And when I say AI, I'm like implying in the future a more advanced real AI that could possibly actually be an ancient one reactivated, like tying it back to the Tower of Babel moment of reaching God technology, one world language, and like getting back into whatever that was. And then all of a sudden being able to that you've developed the million different pieces to recreate whatever that past technology thing was, that now anything that's left over and was in this solid crystal state, like these supposed golden tablet libraries and crystal skull library things, or whatever they may be, if they are originals and leftover advanced encoded pieces of technology, reconnecting to that same one world Babel language moment. Who knows?
Well, Tower of Babel is interesting because it is very, metaphorical in a sense, like the Mount Meru experience, where it's either a physical place, which it is, or it's a dimensional portal, which, to the ancient Buddhist, it also is. And so, wow, what actually are we looking at with a lot of these structures? The crystal skulls is interesting because will that crystal actually retain information? Good potential that it would. And so how do we retrieve the information that's been programmed into some of these ancient crystalline or granite structures that we aren't seeing? There's got to be something else there that we could pick up on. But do we have the cipher or the decoding process to actually decode what that information or those pulse systems would be? So, yeah. I guess the other shameless plug. In my book, Dropa Stones, Lores, and Legend, I get into a little bit of this. I'm going to be doing
a lot of bit of it. You're pretty much like the leading author research authority on the Dropa Stones, actually being over in Nepal and China, Tibet, and getting your hands on it and support.
Well, both of these books talk a lot about the symbology of ancient times, and so I mean, there's a crossover with both of them, and so they're, to me, they're just introductories. Obviously, do your own research, look into this stuff yourself, but there's a lot out there that a lot of people overlook because we're all armchair tourists now, thanks to the internet. I always say to people, get out in the field and actually go to some of these sites and, try and research some of this stuff on its own. This space is very interesting. This is outside of Cusco. And if you rub your fingers across the waterfall that's coming down, it will split.
Yes, it literally cuts the stream and the water stops just by rubbing your finger across it. It stops it and starts it. Got to experience that.
We have the three levels of the different phases of humanity in this structure, and so this is part of the the sacred sun structure of the ancient Peruvians, where they'll have this the sacred square cross with the whole sun in the middle, the sun within the sun as they call it. But it's interesting that they always have these three levels, and so what is the representation of the three levels? And I need to actually talk to Brian a little bit more about this because this is his area of expertise, not mine. I'm just I'm a researcher that's been to a lot of these sites, but it's like I haven't dug deep into some of the physicality of what these sites really are representing, because if you look at the inside of that, you have the three retrieving layers, but you also look at the outside of that and you also have three retrieving layers. And so it's like as above, so below, the mirror effect. And a lot of these sites everywhere in the world that we find a lot of these ancient megalithic sites, guess what's associated with all of them? Water. And so water is interesting because if you can funnel water in the correct way and create enough pressure, you can cut stone with water with, next to laser precision. I'm not saying that, sculptures and reliefs are made this way. There's a possibility that a lot of the reliefs in Egypt's ancient Kemet are done with a hydrofluoric acid. And so they would make basically a stencil, and they would burn the image into the stone that then would be, dug out because the acid would deteriorate a lot of the stone, and then they could perfect it. And this is what we do today with, most engravings. If you've ever done printmaking, this is how you do printmaking. You use, acid on a copper plate, and that's how you make a print that's going to, you can reproduce over and over and over again. And so the ancients were also doing this. Yeah, here we have cut marks. Oh, who's sawing this stuff and with what? Oh, this is
like clearly advanced ancient technology.
No, this is not modern. This is ancient, and this is not copper saws with sand and water. This is something.
Diamond tip spin, like high rotation, like something.
Plowing through a very high velocity. And even Christopher Dunn talks about this. And he looked at some of the plow rates that he could see in the stone. And he's like, they're moving through this material faster than we do today. So we use spinning saws and a lot of water and a lot of we actually use sand and crystalline matter within that water to help those blades actually cut through things. But we're doing it at a lot slower pace than the ancients were doing it. And so this beggars the question, if we're having to use this technology today, how on earth were they doing it back then?
And how is it not blatant evidence of advanced machining and technology?
Well, it is. We might not find the tools, but we have the evidence that the tools existed. And that's the one thing I want people to think about, when they look into history, is we're often told, oh, this was all done with copper chisels and diorite bashing balls and saws. And I'm like, come on now, a copper chisel can't create what you're looking at right now. You need some sort of hardened metal or a diamond tipped metal to do a lot of this stuff. And so, where's that? That must be in China somewhere.
This is in Dodap, India.
Oh, it is, okay. So
it's like you got star forts and like walls and bigger forts and temples, and
there's a site like this outside of Kandy in Sri Lanka. That's a mountain that's pretty much dug out like this. And the question is, when was this done? Because there's tales of it in the Ramayana and other, these ancient tales of these amazing palaces on top of cliff sides. And so you've got to wonder, well, okay, how old are these structures if they're in these ancient scripts?
Is this ancient Bluetooth like
That's
wireless speaker going on here?
I used to own that model.
Right? Like
What actually is going on there? Yeah, no. So there's a lot. Wow, I just saw this one pop up. What? Electricity. Well, electricity is an interesting concept because, you know, it surrounds us everywhere. It's either a piezoelectric force, it's a, you know, force from nature like lightning bolts. Can you capture lightning in a bottle? You know, this has always been that interesting concept. Well, today we can, and so the question is, could they have it in the past? Well, we got the Baghdad battery. That's a weak example of electricity. That's super weak. But how are the ancient Cometians or Egyptians electrifying gold to electroplate different structures? If you look at the X-ray scans of King Tut's mask, which are fascinating, it's all micro welding and riveted together. How are they doing micro welding? We do that today with an, you know, acetylene torch and like arc reaction in a sense to be able to micro weld plate structures together. But they were doing this, you know, 1300 BC when King Tut was around. Wait a second, what's that's all about? Okay, so this is an interesting site. This is the
Valley of the Kings or tombs in Egypt.
isn't the Valley of the Kings. It's actually outside of London. The Valley of the Queens.
Oh, really?
The Valley of the Queens is across the river. The Valley of the Elders, it's not the Valley of the Kings. But that rubble structure on the left is the remains of an ancient pyramid. Yep, that. This is, it's at Abydos. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's not coming to me at the moment. It's the Temple of Hatshepsut. And so when you actually go up in there, it's amazing to go up into this site. But you have this rubble pile on the left there, and that, you know, shows evidence that there was a pyramidical structure there. And so what was this site used for? I mean, it's beautiful when you go there. It's such an amazing site. So
Right? Like just so many bucket list locations, and that you, my friend, have already had the pleasure of being there many of them, but we got to go back. We got to do it with new eyes.
I've been to Egypt twice, and, you know, I love the sites that I went to, but because you're on tours, you're rapidly rushed through a lot of these sites. So you spend like an hour at the Temple of Hatshepsut, then you get on the bus and you go to another site in Abydos, and then, you know, it's like, could we spend at least 5 hours at some of these sites and actually see what is going on here? And, you know, I found that when I was in Mexico. You go to Chichen Itza,
yeah,
and, you know, they're still finding pieces of Chichen Itza in the jungle, and the tour guides will only take you to the massive major temples, but they won't take you to any of the other small structures that are also there in the valley. And I was there with Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Timothy Hogan, and he took us around past the observatory, which is the only round building there, but it stares up to the sky. I can't remember what it's staring at, but they've figured out the time period when it possibly was built. It could be older, and what it was looking at in the stellar sky. But you go past this structure and you come to a temple where on all the corners there's elephant motifs. Well, there's no elephants in South America or Central America. There were mammoths.
Whoa, really? Mammoth or mastodon depiction, essentially.
And temple structure next to it, there's a beehive. Everybody's getting stung. Sitting over the lintel of the temple structure next to it is a man or an individual. I don't know, man, female, whatever. Sitting in lotus position over the mantle. And it's like, okay, why do we have like
yoga, Freemasonry,
relics here in Central America? So I produce a lot of this. The piece in the upper left comes from the Temple of Isis. It's way back in the back if you're going down toward the river. Sadly, the Temple of Isis on Philae Island was not where it originally was. They had to rebuild. The Germans rebuilt a lot of it after the Aswan Dam was built. But this image shows a character holding two divining rods of duality, sitting underneath the great serpent.
Duality of go forward or stop break in my machine that flies. The two controllers potentially.
But it shows the same thing that we see at La Venta, which is the one on the right, which is this Olmec sculpture of the dragon or the serpent being wrapping around this character holding the man bag. Usually the man bag is in the left hand, which is interesting that it here is in the right hand. But if you look at, the ancient, what is it, the tree of life, the left hand path is knowledge and the right hand path is wisdom or is, sorry, I'm spacing it. But you also find this motif with Siddhartha or Sakyamuni because he meditated under the tree and the great serpent came and protected him from the environment. And so it's almost the same symbology across these cultures. And it's interesting that, people don't put these together, but at some point, here we come back to, what Walter Bosley has been talking about with the Kham people. Well, the Kham are like the Kem from ancient Egypt. We find Kham structures in Iran and Persia, all the way across Asia through Tibet, Nepal, India, or India, Nepal, Tibet, all the way into now Indonesia. And there's a possibility that they had come across and were what we call now today the Olmec culture. And so this was a global culture, the Kham. Who were the Kham? A lot of people talk about Tartaria, but I think a lot of what Tartaria was this ancient Kham culture. Just that's my opinion and my, from my research, but you definitely find in a village in southern Kham Tibet, it's not quite central China, but it's close to it where the Dropa stones supposedly were found. You have a village that has 12 star forts and they're star towers, and they're obviously set up in a very specific pattern, but there's no available aerial footage of the site to actually see if this is set up in some sort of a reflection of the skies above. So similar to this, but they're all these star patterns. And so the question is, what were these used for?
This one's Afghanistan and the Tibet.
Something like this would be used, obviously, to look up both the valley above and the valley below. This was a strategic, point. And there's probably only one of these there. But in this village in Tibet, why would you have 12 of these towers? What was their purpose? What were they? Some of them.
Is this a leftover petrified former metal rocket ballistic missile from the last civilization before we blew each other up and nuked ourselves pretty much where we're at today? Maybe not. Just a random thought idea out there.
Would metal
could go along
with
Wise Up's work.
Would metal petrify like that? Or, like what we talk about sometimes in, science fiction movies and TV, when you get into like the Stargate series, they're using technology to drill out the natural stone, and so the stone eventually would petrify into something. So interesting. God, wow, I've never seen some of these places. That is really amazing. What on earth are we looking at?
Like, look at this, and look just to the bottom left of this crazy.
Well, that is
antiquity structure.
That is an older structure than the rest of the building. It's very obvious.
Yeah. Right?
It's not the same architect. Yeah. And so is that gate. And so somebody found this ancient site and decided to refurbish it. And they built the structure next to and around it. The question is, what does it look like?
Maybe under or over top of it, what could still be remaining of this original underneath?
Good point, because, how much cement and underground water piping and whatnot. When I was in Cusco, they were digging up one of the older streets. And this is where they've put a lot of the water piping, electrical piping, and internet stuff through. And as they were digging up, they found an even more ancient staircase. Go back one. So this is always confused as the Dropa stones. If you actually read the book Sun Gods in Exile, the secretary of Carl Robert Evans, his name's David Egerman, he's the one that published it, said that he recreated these plates based on the notes that were in Carl Evans' memoirs and diaries. So these are not real. They're replicated, and it specifically says that in the foreword. But everybody seems to jump on this, oh, these are the Tropa stones and whatnot. But it's interesting because the glyphic writing around it is part cuneiform and part ancient Chinese glyphs, similar to what's on my disc. So I've always found that funny and interesting. But if you actually look at this, I kind of agree with Evans and Lolodoff. These are called the Lolodoff plates, as it says there. These look like fertility discs, similar to what you find in Klaus Donna's collection that are made out.
Yeah.
What's that?
I know exactly what you're speaking of.
Two black schist, or it's one schist disc, and on one side it shows like the embryonic creation, and the other side it shows something else. But what's interesting here is you start out with the sunflower in the middle, and then you have a squirrel or a creature moving forward, glyphic writing, the Vesica Pisces or Yoni, which everybody's like, oh, it's a UFO. You have a naked humanoid. And then next to it are these octopus-looking creatures that, you know, in my research, I'm thinking that's sperm penetrating an egg. And then you have the chameleon, which is the shapeshifter, right, moving out of that. And so this is us. We are the shapeshifters. We're all, interestingly, shapeshifters in a sense. I mean, we don't physically shift shape, but if you look at all
from sperm to egg to shapeshift to new being, right? Like,
correct, yeah. And so I've always found this fascinating, but these are reproductions. And so please do not confuse these with actual, you know, the actual Dropa stones, because they're not. And it's very evident in the foreword of the book that David Egerman sensationalized some of the elements of the story and reproduced some of the elements of the story as well. And so we have to take that into consideration. Because as I keep saying, there's a lot that goes on in that story that could not have possibly been known in the 1970s when it was published, or in the 1940s when the story comes out. There's depictions of fiber optic technology, solid state hard drives, flat screen, curvatured monitors, tip set controls, something like the power glove that we used to have for the old Nintendo systems. This all comes out of this story from Sun Gods in Exile, and none of this was invented in the 1970s, and none of it was invented in the 1940s that we know about. So where is this information coming from?
Right? Like, the things that make you go, and how many coincidences or like exists before it should ever have existed. You know, the only thing that rationally makes sense is it's leftover information that's been deciphered and like transcribed, translated, reproduced in modern interpretations to the best that they could at that time. And then as we progress as technology, society, and information and everything, and time goes on, it's like we're able to interpret and understand even more of what was put in from the ancients in what we're actually looking at. And
yes, I'm answering a thing here on the chat. You know, oh yes, power gloves. Imagine we had that now. Well, interestingly, think about Ready Player One, where they're talking about haptic suits, right? And so haptic suits are interesting because when PlayStation came out with the Rumble Pack, remember that? So you'd get hit and your thing would vibrate. I was like, God, why don't they use this for military tech? So if you're shot in a virtual environment, your suit would feel that impact.
Well, they do now.
All of a sudden, Ready Player One comes out, and that's what they're talking about is haptic suits. And it's interesting because my iWatch has haptic abilities on it, and I thought that's fascinating. So anytime, you know, somebody comes to the house and my ring or something goes off, I'll get a buzz on my wristwatch, and it's like, whoa, weird, or a text message. This is all haptics. And you've got to believe that they've got some pretty complex haptic suits going on for military training, for sure.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought up, and I guess it was Cosmic Samurai, or not sure, whoever brought up Ready Player One, as we're going to be discussing that with Blake Lemoyne specifically, and Zertis in an upcoming episode next week, where Lemoyne is going to be going over his thesis regarding simulation and like this God code power thing that exists within programming, AI, the matrix, and simulation, and all of it. But I was talking to him earlier, and he's like, your homework is watching Ready Player One before we have this talk.
Or actually downloading the audiobook, because there's so much more in the audiobook than there is in the actual movie. The movie's amazing. I don't get me wrong.
To do both. I got a week's time. I need a link for the audiobook.
Yeah, the audiobook is amazing, because Ready Player 2 is even more amazing, because it gets into even more interesting technology and another gaming system. Wasn't this used in this building was used in the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. That's the bridge that his opponent falls off of in the end with Sherlock Holmes into the waterfall. I believe.
I think you're right. I didn't know that, but makes sense.
What was Moriarty? I'm like, Mauricio. No, that's not it. It's Moriarty. Yeah. Oh, here we have more Mayan structures with.
Oh, this is Indian. This is in India, I believe.
Antiquitech on top of it. I would have thought that would be Mayan, because it looks very similar to a lot of the Mayan structures that you see. Interesting. This actually could be the building that has all the Kama Sutra structures all around it, that a lot of people don't want you to go see. That's in Kazakhstan or somewhere, yeah. That looks like it's
could be Thailand, Indonesia, or Bali, maybe too. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe Burma. I think it could be Burma, Myanmar.
The tower in the background, yeah, is interesting as well. So it's like, that's why I'm curious where this place is. It could be in Myanmar, but I think it also could be on the old Silk Road, because a lot of these cultures, Buddhist, Hindu, and whatnot, way back in the day, or Kham even, this Kham culture.
You would have a better idea than me. And here we go, the Barcelona one, right? Like
building in Barcelona, yeah. Beautiful. Wow, so amazing. But how long has it taken to construct this thing,
Right? And like the leftovers of what the first pictures of it originally was it's wild. What did it actually come from? And
oh, where's that? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, what are these structures? Come on, people. You have the newer stuff in the foreground, mimicking the older stuff in the background.
like mind blowing. And that's like in between breakdown of still being brick sandstone into becoming full out Badlands dunes / fairy chimney / it's just natural.
Here's one of the old water aquifers. Yep. So they would pump water through these things to get them to different sites, and so that's really fascinating.
Right, like
intricate that is.
Tunisia, like North Africa, Mediterranean, through like Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, and like Greece, Italy, Rome, like all throughout, right? Like just insanely massive scope.
Well, and it shows the technology of the civilization. It's like we need to bring water, fresh water, to all peoples. So let's figure out how to do that. And so a lot of this is, at an angle. So obviously the water will drain through it. But yeah, really, really incredible. Have a good night, Cosmic Samurai. You're here, but peace out.
Oh my, we're almost already at 2 hours.
Yeah, we've been blowing through it. So the next picture is also really fascinating. The Serapeum. So this is an underground structure in Egypt, hewn out of the bedrock. There's no display of any soot on the ceilings. How they were digging this out without getting miners along, I have no idea. This site is also next to an ancient water site, which is fascinating. But these blocks weigh, in excess of 100 tons. There's two of them that have what we see here, which is chicken scratch writing on the surface of them. But these were all hermetically sealed. And the ultimate question is, what were they putting inside of them? And a lot of us think that they were, kind of like what we do in Norway. They're vaults of seeds and other elements, but have been long gone, long removed during ancient times. But when they found this site, a lot of these were still hermetically sealed. And so you see it sits down underground about 4 feet from the tunnel above, and all of these face north, not magnetic north, but actual physical north. And there's 28 alcoves that they've discovered, although I think they've discovered a bunch more. They just don't open them up. And the ultimate
the lids alone are like 40 or 60 tons too.
How did they get these into these alcoves and perfectly?
They don't even fit like through the cave. Like, it's just so insane. Like, the understanding. And yeah, shout out to Grandmaster Timothy Hogan. His Cosmic Summit presentation last summer, he covers this a bunch. And I've heard him, I think, maybe suggested, and I believe also it was Lawrence Gardner who originally suggested that in these were found manna, the white powder, and that it could have been monoatomic gold that was kept within them, and like you said, as essentially like a vault of it. And Hogan was saying that these were like storage bunkers from the previous civilization, and that they rode out surviving the cataclysm or whatever the heck in these tunnel.
He also suggests that they knew it was coming, because the amount of time that it would take to create not only these tunnel systems but these boxes would have been similar to, today we kind of can predict, in a sense, oh, something's coming. We're building all these DUMBs right now, these deep underground military bases or deep underground bases to begin with. And so you go to a site like Derin Kuya or some of these sites in Turkey that have underground structures. You have underground structures in Peru that as well. You have like tunnel systems all over Peru. You have tunnel systems all over the Himalayas. And you have tunnel systems all over Egypt. And the ones in Egypt are the most fascinating because they're huge and they stretch, as I keep saying, 50 kilometers out into the Western desert. And so were they using these to bring water to the site? And I watched a podcast debunking, another researcher out there, which was interesting. And the guy that does the podcast, I won't bring up his name, but I'm sure people know who he is. He debunks a lot of these claims, and he keeps saying there's no water structure underneath the Giza Plateau, and it's like, the hell there wasn't. Go down into the Osiris Shaft.
Lie,
go down into the Osiris Shaft, and you got 4 feet of water at the bottom of it. Where's that water coming from? The underground water table. Come on, it's so evidently right there. If you quit being an armchair researcher and actually go to these sites and see it for yourself. And so this is underground water that it siphons off of both the Nile, but comes from natural sources. And so
here we go, one that has the lid moved and
One open, all
open.
and underneath it is the most amazing chicken scratch hieroglyphic you'll ever see. And so obviously the person or the people that made this were not the people that put the hieroglyphics on it. It's two totally different technologies, two totally different time periods. But that lid actually came from the bottom of the box. So it's all part of the same strategy.
Yeah, originally they carved them from single pieces of like 120 or like 140 ton granite megaliths into what the two pieces hollowed out, and all of it. Like it's mind blowing on so many scales.
And was like, how could we recreate this today? And so he went to a rock a smith or whatever, a master mason, mining crew, and was like, okay, what would it take to build a diuretic structure like this? That's all one piece with the top being a separate piece that came from the original piece. And they said, well, we can't do that. We'd have to build a floor, all the four walls, and then the ceiling, and they'd all be separate pieces, and it would cost somewhere, close to $1 million to produce.
Right?
But this is all one solid piece, and they've cut the bottom off and put it on the top so that it all still resonates with the same, harmony.
Harmonic frequencies and resonation. You got it, right? Like it's so specific. It's so high resource requirements and costs that it has to have a higher purpose of them doing that, and behind why they would put that much energy and resources into building and making these things, right? There has to be a functionality to it for it. And yeah, it's wild. And
they were burials for the bull, the Apis bull, and this is where the name, Sarah Apis.
Just lies, but we're gonna debunk those lies throughout 2025. I'm sorry to cut you off, Hans. I gotta end it right before it gets to 2 hours, so I can use the AI feature to make us a bunch of shorts.
Oh, you're all good. Appreciate the time, and I'm glad we could share this knowledge of the world and different sites. You have a lot of other shows that deal with technology and chemistry and alchemy. And so it's nice to be on here talking about some of the ancient structures of the world. And I appreciate everybody in the audience tonight. Thank you so much. Happy New Year's, everybody. I hope you guys had a great New Year's. Everybody was safe. And you have some great New Year's resolutions. Let's make 2025 the best year that we can.
I agree. Love y'all. And we'll see you on the next one.
You crazy mother. Yeah. It's just fun.